Hello, welcome. This is a presentation on testing integrity, administration, and analysis. I'm Laura Curtis, and I have no financial disclosures or conflicts of interest. Today we're going to review test administration and integrity, including accommodation and accessibility, and test analysis, including statistical analysis, reliability and validity, the KR20, and student test review approaches. Then we're going to have a conclusion and an opportunity to contact me for any questions. So first we're going to be talking about test administration and integrity. Now, before we talk about the specifics of the actual test, like what happens while we're giving the test, let's be proactive. Abbott and Nininger in 2021 talked about setting the tone for what a test is. Talking to the students ahead of time, talking about, yes, it will produce a grade that will allow faculty and students to assess knowledge accumulation, but it also helps faculty improve the course and learn student perspective. Keeping test integrity allows a process and encourages the students to trust the process. So it's important a nursing program acknowledges in the handbooks that issues with integrity occur to minimize instances where there is a written code that's an honor code, along with universal responses within the program to integrity breaches. This would include describing detection, suspicion, investigation, potential findings, and consequences. Students need discussion and signing of the code each semester. We can empower our nursing students by making sure that they understand that nursing is a trusted profession because of honesty, integrity being professional values. Students have the power to support professional integrity by acting as active bystanders with peers as well as personally avoiding integrity issues. And as faculty, we can support the nursing students to be honest by doing things like during the test, assigning seats in the classroom, ensuring students can't easily see each other's screens, and managing belongings. All personal belongings can be left in the front of the classroom during the test, including fluids, bags, electronic devices besides the laptop that they're using for the test, outerwear, sunglasses, and hats. Students are taught to void before tests so that they don't need a bathroom break. Hoods are to be left down, and we keep the test lengths down so that the students don't become uncomfortable with thirst or need to void. No scrap paper or writing utensils, and no sharing of objects. And faculty can make it easy for the students to be honest by scheduling any version of a test to be given all at the same time, using 2 proctors whenever possible, always circulating around the classroom during the tests, arriving early before every test is set up, never leaving the students alone, never leaving the classroom while a test is occurring, using app-based calculators, part of the testing platform, or hand out calculators to each student before the test, take attendance, provide a way for students to anonymously report how students are cheating if they are. So we're looking at accommodations and integrity with accommodations, and that includes accessibility. So first we have to establish a need for accommodations by supporting students to use the Office of Accessibility. We can establish that accommodations ensure equitable access for student nursing with disabilities and not give unfair advantage to abled nursing students. Brody et al. 2025 talks to us about that because we need to ensure that we're using a school official from the office to establish those accommodation rates. We can take training and universal design and instruction to make the classrooms and curriculum more overall accessible. And then there's specific things that we can do, examples of accommodations that include screen readers, speech-to-text software, adaptive keyboards, earplugs or noise-canceling headphones, trifold cardboard cutouts, extended time, and separate space for testing. Some accommodated students would rather test in a separate space so that their peers can't see the equipment they need to use and perpetuate a stigma. Some students need to test in a space without peers nearby due to being reactive to movements or noises around them. Okay, let's talk about test analysis, specifically the statistical analysis. That's a quantitatively way to review an exam. And suggestions in Core 2026 and Morale et al. 2022 suggest using a computer program or computer application to analyze the exams because doing it by hand would take a lot of time that we don't have as faculty. So it's a systematic review of the exams, and it leads to students being satisfied with the exam process and improves exam performance. Quantitative review allows identification of flawed questions, opportunity to correct errors, and opportunity to improve future exams. Quantitative analysis includes overall, detailed, and individual level analysis of the questions, their categories, and the comparison of higher performing and lower performing test takers. It includes the number of items, the number of total points possible, the number of test takers, the mean score, the median score, the low score, the high score, the standard deviation, meaning how much higher or lower from the mean a score may be, standard error of measurement, which is used to create a confidence band, which is a range of a score per individual. Then there's the mean p-value, which is the item difficulty, the mean point by serial index, which is a discrimination of high and low performers, and the alpha, which is a reliability coefficient. All of these analysis points are important because questions need to discriminate between high and low performers, be neither very easy nor very hard because that decreases reliability, need p-values around 0.5 and correct answers with low positive or negative point by serial values. Distractors need a high positive point by serial value, and exams in general need to prepare nursing students for a licensure exam that has more application, critical thinking, and clinical judgment questions. In 2 slides, we'll discuss the qualitative analysis of these exams, which use exam review approaches to gather qualitative data from students. Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about test analysis, reliability, and validity? So reliability refers to how consistently items score from one exam to the next exam administration. So if we're considering a weight scale as an example, it's how likely a scale will give the same weight value for the same item over many measurements. So reliability types include test retest, parallel form, internal consistency, the split half reliability coefficient, the KR20, which we're going to discuss more of in a second, and the coefficient alpha. When we're talking about validity, we're referring to how accurately an exam measures the knowledge that we're trying to assess. So if we're considering that weight scale example again, it's how likely the scale will accurately measure any weight. So validity types include content validity, which is the extent the test reflects content domain, construct validity, which asks the question, does the test reflect the construct of clinical decision making, for example, and criterion validity, which is based on behavior, attitude, or knowledge that is preset, not comparing individuals to each other. Chapter 2 gives information on how to support validity, while Chapter 13 gives information on how to support reliability in Core 2026. Reliability. So the KR20 is the Cooter-Richardson Formula 20. It provides an estimate of reliability based on consistency of responses by students from one item to the next. It is a measure of internal consistency of the exam. So a test is more likely to be reliable if the items are consistently producing similar results because it suggests the test is cohesive and stable. If everyone scored the exact same on a test, the Cooter-Richardson Formula 20 value would be 0. For the reliability coefficient, the higher the reliability value, the more spread the scores are from the mean and the higher the test reliability. So those are some ways that we assure reliability. Now let's switch things over to qualitative test analysis. There's 2 types. There's the faculty-centered, which is in the creating and reviewing of a test before administration. But let's focus more on the student-centered, which is a student test review. So student test review is the collection of qualitative data from students about a test. And Core 2026 tells us that that's best done after the question analysis and before entering grades, after all students have taken any version of the test to avoid unfair advantages, and supports student learning and helps identify undetected bias. There's advantages and disadvantages to different student test review approaches, so we'll go over some. So Core 2026 and Cornine 2025 both describe approaches to student test review, including the full classroom where all the students debrief at once, small groups where students are split into smaller groups, and review or retake the test as a group immediately following it to openly discuss how they answered the questions. There's the individual review, which is one-to-one and most time-consuming out of all the approaches. And then there's allowing the students to give written justifications and proposals of any perceived problems or suggested changes that they wanted to make with the questions, with a deadline submission of 1 to 2 days after the test is administered, but before the final grades are assigned. Corning 2025 also talks about some variations, including student-led versus faculty-led, meaning that the students lead the actual test review and the faculty are there in a supportive role to write down the questions and the information that's generated. Voluntary versus mandatory, she noted that in voluntary cases, many times it's the highest performers and the lowest performers who come, versus the mandatory debriefings where everybody shows up and you get a fuller understanding of the issues with the test. So the considerations we need to consider from Core 2026 is the test security needs to be around the same as when you took the test. We've got to avoid contentiousness by making sure that the questions to the tests are well crafted and follow guidelines. You can avoid open debate or argument by not presenting that the review will change grades and sparingly consider changing grades after the fact. And then there's a challenge to create a non-judgmental space where students feel comfortable discussing reasoning for wrong answers in front of their peers. Student reasoning and written justifications should be used for changing how the faculty teach, understanding how students answer the questions rather than editing the items, which might take away from testing towards the licensure exam. So Corning 2025 notes that student testing reviews, when well done, can communicate compassionate consideration of students and lead to student persistence and higher future grades. So some challenges that I've noticed to having a student test review as described is one of the things that I noticed is that these days in 2025, students want immediate feedback of their scores. They want the results as immediately afterwards as possible. Test scores are high stakes and can be difficult. They can be the difference between students progressing or not in a nursing program. Sometimes students argue a point not because they feel that they're correct, but because they want to raise their grade because they're high performers or they are fighting to stay in the program. Another challenge is the time it takes to do the reviews. So we're talking about the student reasoning and writing justifications and proposals and maybe using that to edit items for future tests, but then the tests will no longer be written to support passing the licensure exams, which are based on professional nursing scope, standards, and knowledge. So instead of doing that, more likely it's important to understand how they're thinking so that we can teach the students how changing their perspective or changing their thinking can lead to better test performance. So Corning 2025 advocates for considering benefits versus risk for student test review. It doesn't need to be an all or nothing, though. Some alternatives can be creating sample questions for during the didactic or learning activities that mirror the types and content of this test to facilitate a formative assessment of material, supporting class discussion of reasoning to answer the types of questions, identify the learning and teaching issues during classes before the test, and keeping the test items to the language and reasoning most likely to mirror the licensure test. Offering an opportunity to provide for students to provide feedback on the test directly afterwards through confidential means with a deadline prior to the posting of grades affords the opportunity for them to give feedback without it being an interaction. So in conclusion, we discussed, the test administration and integrity, including accommodations and accessibility. We talked about the quantitative test analysis, including statistical analysis and KR20, reliability and validity. We talked qualitatively about student test review approaches. And testing is not just about writing an excellent test. It's about setting up students to value test integrity, planning the testing space to assure integrity, accommodations to improve accessibility, and testing analysis. Testing analysis includes quantitatively through statistical analysis and qualitatively through faculty review and assessing students formatively before summative assessments and listening to feedback after the test through various options. Please use the contact information on this slide to reach me, and a link to finding this presentation online is also located on the slide that is submitted with the assignment. Please see the next slide for my references.